What would you do if you awoke amidst a uniquely British apocalypse, without memory and any true sense of purpose? Perhaps you would wander the wildlands, settling into life as an outcast of this green and unpleasant land. Maybe you'd follow the command of the Bleeding Man, blood dripping from their hazmat suit as they urge you out of your slumber and into a quarantine zone in search of the Interchange, a mysterious facility linked to the Windscale fire, one of the first nuclear accidents in recorded human history. Whatever you choose to do, Atomfall is willing to try and support it. Right from the outset, you can do whatever you want. You can follow whatever lines of investigation that you want. Now, given that you'll be poorly equipped, some choices may lead to bad results, says Ryan Green, art director at Rebellion Developments. Eventually, maybe you'll understand what the cause of the accident was, and why it may have been hushed up. You'll meet a lot of characters along the way who will have their own angles on that too, and you're free to believe them if you want to. Even though we don't feed it to you in a nice sequential way, our setup makes for a really rich story. It's kind of like one of those choose your own adventure books we read as kids.
Windscale. Everything changed when that bloody atom plant went up in flames.
Atomfall doesn't have a traditional quest system. It's one of the largest differentiators between this new Rebellion IP and Bethesda's Fallout. The studio, known for its Sniper Elite series, as well as production of 2000 AD comic books, has been influenced by serialized storytelling which underpinned classic science fiction. We like to think of it as the X-Files in the Cold War Lake District, Green laughs. It can be difficult to wrap your head around what this game is. There are RPG-ish elements, but it's definitely not an RPG. Atomfall is a detective game. It's a survival game. There's weird stuff happening and you have to adapt to it. You have to talk, you have to research, and you might have to do violence. There are no quests, only leads. Put another way, there are questions, a lot of questions, and few distinct answers. You awake in 1962, 5 years after the historic Windscale disaster, without any memory of who you are and where you came from. Leads intersect with one another, contest with, and ricochet off from one another. There's friction inherent to the storytelling, as every character you encounter offers their own perspective on the world around them, and present their own leads that you can pursue, leading to different outcomes. Follow the leads you want to, disregard the rest. Maybe you'll form a perspective of your own and get a sense of how this radioactive quarantine zone came to be. Rebellion has gone out of its way to remove all unconscious bias from Atomfall's story. There's no indication of your character's race, gender, or age. You're a true blank slate by design, an amnesic detective in search of answers. Leads don't cast judgment on a situation, only provide context, allowing you to follow your intuition and form a moral compass. As for how characters around you respond to your actions, well, results can vary. There's a giant spider web of leads. There are situations where you might do something that befriends one person or upsets another, and there's loads of that happening all the time, says Ben Fisher, creative director for Atomfall. We signpost that you found a lead, but we don't tell you if you've lost a lead. A journal full of lines of potential investigations, dead ends, and perceived misinformation is a key detail in Atomfall, particularly as no inhabitant of this world is safe. Theoretically, you could play through the game by killing every single character and still find enough leads to uncover a route through the game and understand what's happening, teases Fisher. Green tells me there are about 5 or 6 core ending permeations within Atomfall, and that it's how you choose to pursue leads that will bring each into focus. You can kill people at certain times in the game that will potentially sever a line to complete an ending, he says, with Fisher adding, there are also routes to reconfigure some of them by talking to certain characters, making smart choices, or bartering with traders for different information. We want players to question everything, to not trust anyone. We want players to make their own decisions, to adapt to their surroundings and follow whichever leads they want to, says Green. Atomfall is open-ended by design then. Your ability to move through conversation routes isn't defined by underlying character stats, as it may be in a game like Fallout, but it is as open-ended as the mission system. If I were to stretch to make a comparison, Atomfall may have more in common with LA Noire in this respect, with responses categorized by emotional markers such as curious, angry, or desperate, giving you the space to play up or conceal certain pieces of information, or pursue specific lines of investigation based on leads you have accrued so far. The demeanor of characters will change over time the further you submerge yourself within the world. So too can the populations of villages and towns depending on your aggression or apathy. There's a lot to praise about Atomfall's world design. The Lake District in Cumbria setting is visually distinct from your typical American post-apocalyptic setting, with arid expanses swapped out for lush rolling hills and verdant horizons. It's a picturesque scene captured in the aftermath of an atomic incident. The setting has allowed Rebellion to indulge in some traditionally British high strangeness, best evidenced by the decaying red telephone boxes strewn across the landscape. You'll hear the distinctive ringing tone from afar, a voice in the other end typically offering some sort of cryptic clue once the receiver is brought to your ear. Oberon must die, the voice may say, before the line clicks dead, a new lead added to your journal. Part of the idea for this whole thing was this one time Jason had been walking out in some natural area, says Green, recalling a story about Jason Kingsley, one of the enigmatic and somewhat eccentric co-founders of Rebellion, who spends his spare time living as a medieval knight. He heard this ringing, and there really was a phone box out there in the most unexpected of places. He thought it was the eeriest, weirdest thing, so he knew it would be super fun to get that into Atomfall, because it speaks to that whole English weirdness vibe. The non-linear approach to mission and narrative design also applies towards combat. Like Sniper Elite before it, Atomfall gives you multiple routes to approach an objective, and circumvent danger should you want to. Rebellion may be best known for creating first-person shooters, but the barrel of a gun is just one point of interaction within this world. You'll find weapons strewn across the landscape, and wielding a knife or cricket bat could be preferred given how scarce ammunition is. The cascading noise created by gunfire attracting a mass of unwanted attention, a challenge in a game world where even 3 or 4 enemies can prove to be unsurmountable. It's more like a bar brawl than a war zone, says Fisher. You can only quick slot up to 4 weapons at any one time, and scouring the environment for crafting materials and ammunition will be a constant concern. Rebellion has engineered a light skill system where military and survival manuals can be unearthed, and combined with a rare training stimulant material to help improve core proficiencies in conditioning, melee, ranged, and survival. That said, the studio is taking a somewhat open approach to difficulty as well. We don't have traditional difficulty settings, but playstyle settings instead, says Green, explaining that the team is keen to support players in the ways that they want to play Atomfall. Fisher adds, because the game isn't just about combat, we allow the player to choose different playstyles that influence the amount of resource scarcity, the intensity of combat, and the amount of guidance for their exploration. Rebellion believes that the most interesting way to engage with Atomfall is to accept the fine-tunings, where combat is brutal and intense, where exploration is open and unguided, and where resources are scarce. But we don't want to dictate that for people, says Fisher. We want as many people as possible to play the game. That even extends to the way that you can interact with perceived enemies. It's possible to disengage or avoid combat entirely, a small window of opportunity to walk away from a confrontation before blood is spilled, and you'll even see other characters attempt to back away from you too. You are meeting characters who are doing their best to survive in this situation, Fisher adds. Nobody's right or wrong, they've just got different perspective on what's happening. It's up to you to decide who you trust. We don't want the world to feel like a gung-ho war zone. We want it to feel as if everyone is just as desperate for resources as you are. Atomfall isn't what I was expecting it to be. Rebellion has struggled to separate itself from the idea that it's creating Fallout Cumbria, but the truth is that the studio has set its sights on something far more creatively ambitious. The open-ended approach to combat and world navigation shares DNA with the Sniper Elite series, but the wider scale presented by Atomfall means there's potential here for something quite transformative, unlike anything we've seen from Rebellion in its 32-year history. Layer the non-linear approach to progression, the potential for something quite special suddenly emerges onto the radar for 2025. It's all about player choice, says Green. We're going to have a lot of options for things to do and see, and then you can piece them together in any order you want to make the story that you end up with. We're so excited to see how players engage with Atomfall. So, are you excited for Atomfall? What are you most looking forward to in this distinctly dystopian Britain? Let us know in the comments, and stick with GamesRadar for the biggest titles of 2025.